Thom and Delphine Delrue created history. Seung came back from a game in 17-9 down to keep her Super Slam dream alive. The women's doubles final was a nail-biter. Antonsen made it third time lucky, and Seung Jae and Kim Won-ho not just broke the home crowd's hearts, but kept their own Super Slam dream alive too. All of that and more in this week's episode of Beckman's Breakdown, the show where I take a look at all of BWS World Tour events from Super 500 up to Super 1000, including the majors and the team events. This week was the Indonesia Open Super 1000, one of the four of the highest tier of tournaments. You could, in essence, call it one of badminton's Grand Slams. But before I go on, the usual reminder that if you want to buy any Beckman's Breakdown merchandise, then you can do so by clicking the link in the description. I'll also pin a comment. Any purchase helps not just the channel, but the young aspiring badminton player behind it. I also think it looks pretty cool, but yeah, link in description, 20% off until the first 20 orders are made, and there's free worldwide shipping. Now, I'll be honest, with this being the fourth consecutive week of competition, there's no doubt that a number of the players are feeling rather tired. But us fans are also feeling it. I certainly am. Most mornings this week I've woken up needing a coffee the size of the 2-minute timeout boards. And it's with that in mind that neatly leads on to my first topic in this week's episode of Beckman's Breakdown. So yeah, like I said, I've been feeling a little bit of badminton fatigue. Even the biggest fans of the sport like me, we do feel it when there's been week after week after week after week of competition. But like, do you know when you're at a buffet and you're getting to that point where you're pretty full and you've been eating all the meats, all the savoury stuff, then if you switch it to something a little bit sweet or you change up your dipping sauce, then that can reinvigorate your hunger and you can go on a little longer. I know that's a bit of a weird analogy, but that's exactly how I felt when I saw the different coloured quartz. The purple quartz or blue quartz or purpley blue quartz. Regardless, the change of colour in the quartz for the Indonesia Open. I must admit, I thought they looked rather nice. It did kind of give me that Badminton Excel vibe. It looked pretty similar. Obviously, that was played in the Astoria as well. Joking aside, you know, it did actually reinvigorate me. The other thing that reinvigorated me was that the badminton on display was really, really good. All week, so many matches really caught my eye. But I must admit, I do also like the change in the court colour. Not just because it was a change, but also I think it's quite a good thing for badminton. I think it's quite nice that, you know, we've got the grey courts at the All England. I know people are a little bit hit and miss with those. They do look far better in person than they do on TV. And we've obviously got the red courts for the World Tour Finals that are even more divisive as a colour. And now we've kind of got the bluey purpley courts for the Indonesia Open. I think for the big tournaments, so the Super 1000s and the World Tour Finals, having their own unique colour is actually pretty cool. It's a way just to kind of to keep things a little bit fresh, but also from a marketing perspective, it's incredibly recognisable. So whenever you're flashing through, you see those courts, you know, that's the Indonesia Open. I know some other tournaments, even if they use the green matted courts, have that vibe. You know, I've watched badminton long enough that if I'm switching it on and I see a match, even a quick rally from, say, the French Open, I know immediately that's the French Open, or the Japan Open's quite recognisable. You know, a lot of them have their own little recognisable traits, whether it's the quality of the sound can sometimes be that, the visuals, where the camera angle is placed. We all know that slightly changes throughout the tour, but just the change of colour for me, just it immediately, I think it makes it more recognisable, which could actually be quite useful in terms of media use and marketing and all that kind of thing. Plus, it's just nice, isn't it? You know, there's so many events on the World Tour. If it's always the green courts, the green courts, the green courts, even if everything around it is changing, just having that change actually is more, that's what you look at more, and that's what I look at for certain. So yeah, no, it kind of did reinvigorate me a little bit. I was quite excited the first few days. I was like, oh, that looks really cool. And then what kept that that going was the fantastic badminton on display. You know, I will be talking about a number of those matches that caught my eye. This leads on to two things. One is I'm quite interested to see if the China Open Super 1000, the last 1000 of the year, whether they will try to do anything different. You know, because, you know, Malaysia kept with the green courts, that's fine. All England had the grey, Indonesia's had the bluey purple. Just interested to see whether China will rock anything different. I mean, who knows? We might get the classic colour, we might get something a bit new. What colour would you like to see? I know China's quite big on the red, but they've already got that for the World Tour Finals, and in all honesty, I'm not sure I could handle 2 tournaments in a year with that garish red. I think something a bit different would be really cool, but I'd love to hear what you think. The other thing I want to bring up is, whilst I felt that the court changing, the court colour change was really nice, obviously one thing that I did see a lot of online, a lot of complaints, was the quality of the TV broadcast. Now, BWF's quality of streaming online or their YouTube broadcast channel always comes under fire, but this week it was a little bit more noticeable that the quality was a little down. I'm not quite sure why. I think a few people said that this is something that's always been kind of the case with the Indonesia Open. Now, I'm not a techie. I could still enjoy the badminton. I didn't think the quality was that horrific that I was like, oh my god, what's that? But then that's me. I don't really care too much, so long as you can actually somewhat see the quality, the game clearly, which I could when I watched it on my TV. It was fine. I could watch it on my phone and not have to kind of squint my eyes or really strain myself. I felt it was okay, but a lot of people were talking about the quality of it being a little bit lower. But having said that, there is something that I'll come back to at the end, but the BWF do have in the makings some huge plans for the World Tour from 2027 onwards. I'm not going to go into more than that, but one part of it was an increase in the broadcasting of the events. I think Super 1000s, 100% of the matches, that's all 4 courts, are going to have like TV quality broadcasting, and I think obviously with that they're going to have a little bit more. I think they're going to try to bring a bit more of a uniformity towards their broadcasting, not just in terms of the quality, but the angle, the sound, everything. So hopefully issues like what some people are bringing up at this Indonesia Open will get resolved with that. But personally, you know, I'm not someone that knows too much about this. I'm not going to, you know, it didn't really bother me too much. Again, I was too enrolled in the action on court and appreciating the colour of the court. So yeah, let me know your comments. I've already asked you what do you think the colour of the China Open court should be, but let me know your own comments on the quality of the broadcast, as well as what you felt of the court colour they use at the Indonesia Open. Okay, so if any of you have been following me for any period of time, know that my favourite badminton player at the moment is Akane Yamaguchi. I just love the way she plays, how she's able to cover the court, and I just love her demeanour and attitude. She could win a first round in an international series or win the world title, and if you had those side by side with no context, I'm not sure you'd be able to tell the difference. She's known to barely celebrate, maybe a wry smile. She's just so reserved, and for some reason I just really respect that, and I really appreciate her as a player, and she's also just fantastic to watch. But obviously in recent times, I think since early last year, I think she injured her hip in the lead up to the Olympics, which did really hamper her chances there. And I think she's really struggled to kind of come back from that injury to get near full fitness. On this Asia leg, she has shown some good form. You know, she reached 3 consecutive semi-finals, semi-final in Malaysia, Singapore, and then Indonesia. But the players that she lost to were all 3 players that are ranked above her. And at the moment, I just see Akane Yamaguchi as the 5th best player in the world. You know, she's the top of the 5 to 10. The top 4, Seung, and the 3 Chinese players, Han Yue, Wang Ziyi, and Chen Yufei, are the ones that are above her, and she's struggling to get wins over those players. In fact, the 3 losses in the semi-finals were in Malaysia was to Han Yue, Singapore to Wang Ziyi, and in Indonesia it was to Seung. So the way I kind of see Akane Yamaguchi's game, firstly, I'm going to be very positive and I think she has one more good run in her, in terms of I think she can get back to her best, you know, the period where she was winning All England titles. She won her back-to-back world titles. She was world number one. She was consistently reaching the finals of all the World Tour events. I do think she can get near that again. I think she's shown capabilities, she's shown glimpses of that top game in all three of those semi-finals. She had moments, especially in the last two in Singapore and in Indonesia. She showed really good high moments. But the problem for Akane Yamaguchi at the moment is there's too many low ones. I see her game as a bit of a roller coaster. In Singapore, if I'm honest, I can't remember who she played in the quarterfinals. I actually can't remember the match before her semi, but I was watching it going, wow, this isn't very good. I mean, she managed to win, obviously, but she looked to be looking a bit sluggish. She was struggling to cover the court. You know, one of her biggest assets seemed to be on the down, and I was like, Christ, she's going to really struggle if she plays like this against Wang Ziyi. And then she had an absolute blinding game against Wang Ziyi and brought her level right back up. So she's a little bit like this, a bit up and down. I did feel actually in Indonesia it was a little steadier, but still a little bit up and down. And even in the semi-final against Seung, it was, I think, two really close games. But there was like, she was playing a really good high level, but then she'd have that moment where it would just drop, and you can't afford that against the top players at the moment. And Seung completely capitalised and got a lead that, yeah, Akane managed to shrink it back, but wasn't able to obviously get back and win those games. And she showed it in her quarterfinal Indonesia against Wardani. She was lucky to win the second game. She was miles down in that second, looked almost completely out of it. And then I think Wardani maybe coasted a little bit, and has combined that with the fact Yamaguchi then started to kind of raise her game and get back to near that top and was able to sneak the win. But all those matches are kind of like, for me, cement what I'm saying. They're kind of highlighting it, that whereas before, when she was at her best, all players have up and down moments. You know, there's no getting around that. Even Seung has her up and down moments. So she showed that this week in Indonesia. But not only is the highs very good, but when they come low, they don't dip that far or dip for very long. Or if it's on a way down, they have to find a way to kind of level it off and then kind of reset themselves to come back up. And Akane Yamaguchi had that ability before, back in 2022, 2023, and obviously before then. But since her latest injury, it's been really difficult. So she's had a good high level, although I don't think it's as high as her very best. It's not far off, but it's not quite there. But her lower points are way down on what she was, and she has too many of these up and down moments. So yeah, no, that's kind of where I see Yamaguchi's game right now. She's shown glimpses, like I said, of absolutely brilliant play, and I do have faith. Maybe that's because I really, really like her as a player and I want her to do well. But yeah, no, at the moment, she had a solid Asia leg. 3 semi-finals is good. But for a player that was regularly getting, only 2 years ago, was always getting into the finals and was a reigning 2-time world champion, world number one, that's not what we expect from her. We'd expect her to be right up there. And another reason why I really want her to do it is because, again, it will just add a little bit more flavour into the women's singles, because it's looking quite likely at the moment that you have Seung and 3 Chinese players. So to have a different nationality within that, just for now, will be really good. Obviously, Akane Yamaguchi is also part of that golden generation, so that's another factor as well. So yeah, no, I really hope that she can, obviously, she doesn't look like the injury is getting any worse. It looks like she's maybe got the injury issues behind her. It's just about rebuilding and refining her game. And, she's a quality player. She knows what it takes. And I have faith that she can, get back up to the heights that we've seen of her in the past. Okay, so I've already talked about how, 4 weeks of top competition, if you include the Taipei Open with the Super 300 before the Thailand Open, then that's 5 weeks. Some players were on the road 5 weeks. No one played all 5 tournaments, but there was a number who played all 4. And there were a number of top players that played all 4, and a few of them did very well, most notably Aaron Cha and Chou Yik. They lost first round in Indonesia to Frederick Sogard and Rasmus Kjær. Funnily enough, they were, Frederick and Rasmus, the last pair to beat Aaron and Cha in an individual competition, and it was in the first round of a Super 1000. And that was the All England. So it's funny how that's almost like become a full circle. But yeah, no, they did incredibly well. But obviously outside of that Indonesia Open loss, they got reached 3 consecutive finals, winning 2 of them. Pearly and Thinaah Murialitharan are another pair. In Indonesia, they reached a final and came agonisingly close to winning the title, but they won in Thailand at the start. They got to the semi-finals of Malaysia and the quarter-finals in Singapore. That's a fantastic set of results. Really, really good from them. And it's really impressive because obviously you can imagine you're playing 4 weeks doing back-to-back travel, although this tour there isn't too much gap between the tournaments. The distance between Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia is very minimal. It's almost like the equivalent of going from like England to France and then to Germany. It's very, very close for Europeans if you want to have some sort of reference. Very, very close indeed. But still, it's still the travel. You still got to pack, you still got to get out of the hotel, you still got to get to the airport, you still got to fly, you still got to then duel, you still got to get used to the hall, and there's lots of things there. Obviously, physically, it's hard, especially if you're doing well, like the 2 pairs I mentioned. They're playing plenty of matches, and mentally as well. There's lots of the ups and downs. Competition is as much of a mental battle as it is a physical one. And it's for that reason that I was insanely impressed with the guy that I really want to talk about in this section, and that's Dechapol Puvenukroh. And the reason for that is not only did he play all 4 of those tournaments, he played 2 events in all 4 of those tournaments. In fact, by the time that he played the final in the Indonesia Open in the mixed doubles, it was his 25th match across those 4 tournaments. That's an average of 6.25 matches per tournament. And if you consider that there's only 5 maximum you can play, I think he's playing more. He played the equivalent of more than a tournament. So even if, say, Aaron Chan-Soo-ik had got to the final again, they still wouldn't have played as many matches as Dechapol. And obviously when you consider that, if you're playing 2 events, there's some days where you're playing more than 1 match in a day. As far as Dechapol's results go, he did do far better in the mixed doubles. I think that's kind of expected. That's where he's had more of his success. And I think he's got a partner in Supasara that's a little bit better in terms of relevant level to the success in the discipline as opposed to Kedrin. But yeah, no, in the men's doubles, he got to the semi-finals in Thailand, and then he had a first round in Malaysia and then 2 second rounds in Singapore and Indonesia. But it was in the mixed doubles, obviously, like I said, where he's had the most success. Quarter-final Thailand, quarter-final Malaysia, then he won in Singapore and a runner-up in Indonesia. Quite funny, actually, saying those results out loud, because although I didn't talk about this in a Beckman's Breakdown episode previously, I was going to mention it last week, but I didn't. And that is that I felt that players that played both 500s might struggle to do well. That might be at the detriment to the 750 and the 1000, whereas the Dechapol did better in those tournaments as opposed to the 2 500s. It's quite funny how that worked out. Maybe that's just something he needs. He needs to play lots and lots of competition. However, having said that, I do think that one of the big reasons as to why he lost in the final, he lost to the French pair of Thom Gicquel and Delphine Delrue. There's more to this than that, and I will talk about that when I talk about the French pair a little later, but there was definite signs that Dechapol was a little bit tired. He did try at moments to raise his game, but there was just signs to me that he was a bit tired. He's obviously one of the fastest players around the back of the court, and it's not like he suddenly played really slow, but you could just sense that he wasn't quite as energetic, quite as jumping up to as many shots as he usually is. Usually he's very busy on his feet, especially in defence. He almost was kind of not sitting back, but would almost sometimes let the shuttle come to him, just saving a little bit of energy in his legs. He just didn't quite have that oomph to go. Yeah, I do think that there was a little bit of fatigue did play a part in the final, but it wasn't just the final where I saw that he was looking a bit tired. He looked a bit tired in the semi-final as well. And in that semi-final, I have to give huge credit to Supasara. I think Supasara brought that energy up and really kind of lifted Dechapol, especially because they were playing against the Malaysians of Chen Tangji and Chou. They've been reformed as a partnership and had a good run there to the semi-finals. But in the first game, Dechapol and Supasara were leading the majority of the game, but then the Malaysians snuck it at the end. And I felt that might have been a little bit deflating for him, especially if he was feeling a little bit tired, maybe mentally and physically. You're like, oh, now I've got to go, if I want to win this, I've got to do it in 3. And that can sometimes weigh a little bit heavy on you, especially after so many matches, so many weeks of competition. But it was at that point, the start also kind of cemented that to me. I think the Malaysians got a pretty good start, and it looked like it was going to run away from the Thai pair. But that was when Supasara stepped up, dominated the net. She is a fantastic player from there, but just her energy and stuff, she just tried to win the net battle as much as she could to get as many, obviously, chances for Dechapol, but also just to kind of put the game into their hands that should make the game a little bit easier. And you could see it kind of lifted Dechapol. And by the third, I wouldn't say that he was suddenly firing on cylinders. The cylinders were definitely running at half full, but he was mentally looked a little bit fresher, a little bit more rejuvenated, and they were able to get over the line. But in the final, like I said, I'll get onto it a bit later, but not only was they a bit tired, but I think the French pair, the way they played was a huge factor in them winning. But again, like I said, I'll talk about that later. But yeah, Dechapol, absolutely insane. 25 matches in 4 weeks. He must be feeling it. He looked like he definitely was. I hope that he takes maybe a week off and allow his body to recover and rest, because, there's a little bit of a period now. I've seen a lot of the players on Instagram have been going on holiday. They're taking a little break, and I hope that he does the same so that he can obviously then get back and be fresh for the tournaments in Japan and China, but with a slightly longer look at the Worlds, because come the World Championships, him and Supasara are going to be huge medal contenders. So next, I want to talk about the Indonesian pair of Isfahani and Gutama. They had an absolutely incredible week. Their first reaching the final, reaching their first Super 1000 final, and it was on home soil. Absolutely amazing. It obviously, for me, also kept a little bit of interest for the home crowd, which is always really good, and you could feel the energy in that final. You could feel the energy throughout the whole week, and especially in the semi-finals. There's something specific about the semis that I will talk about a bit later, but the final was absolutely amazing. It was a great match, and the energy in the crowd was, I think, overall very positive. Obviously, they were heavily supporting Gutama and Isfahani, and it was an absolutely brilliant final. Before I talk a little about the final, obviously the Istora Senayan with its fast and windy conditions does suit Gutama and Isfahani very well. They are very, very good in the first 3 to 4 shots, so in the service situation. And they also play a kind of style that's a little bit on the knife edge. When they're playing in these sort of venues, they rarely want to lift. They're always willing to take on the slightly harder, more difficult choice if they feel it can disrupt their opponents. They really don't like to give their opponents much rhythm at all. In fact, in the semi-finals, it was quite funny, the difference in how the two matches played. So in Gutama and Isfahani against Man and T, I think the longest rally was around 30 shots, but that was very rare. And in the next semi-final, Kim Won-ho, Seung and Jae, the Korean pair against Alfie and Ardianto, I think they beat that longest rally by like 8-9 in the first game. That's the kind of difference in the styles. That's the way that Gutama and Isfahani approach their badminton. It's very exciting to watch. You can go through runs of points where there aren't many rallies, which some people might find a little bit dull, but for me it's the intrigue. Even if the rallies are short, whether this pair win them or lose them, it's what they're trying to do is, I have a real appreciation for it, because it's really, really difficult to pull off. But pull off, for the most part, they were able to do this week. Obviously, one big thing I have to talk about when it comes to this pair, other than their style and the final and the fact that they were able to reach the final, is that obviously Isfahani, they did all of this whilst one of them was carrying an injury. Isfahani, I think he was in the quarterfinals. I'm not sure when he injured his back. I actually didn't notice this, funnily enough, because obviously, as you know, in these tournaments, you've got 5 disciplines, so many matches, and most of the time they're on multiple courts. I actually, when it came to their quarterfinal, I only watched it through one of the channels on YouTube that just does the rallies, so you don't get anything of the in-between. It cuts it out. It's a good way to kind of digest a number of matches to watch. And one of the ones that I did through that was their quarterfinal against Gosifei and Nurzudin. After that match, I did a video for the BWF where I did a prediction for who would win the 2 semis. I got them both right. I did. The Badminton Oracle right here. But I felt I actually did that not knowing that there was an injury to Isfahani. And when I posted it to my Instagram as well, I saw a number of comments going, I think they can do it, but it's going to be difficult because of the back injury. And I was like, what back injury? The way that he was playing and still in that quarter-final didn't really show too many signs for me. But then when I watched their semi-final and final, and I watched it in full, live, it was quite noticeable. There was some moments where he was protecting it. Another two things about this pair. One, and Steen mentioned this, and it leads into something I mentioned last week, is that Gutama has clearly improved his front court. And like I said, this leads into what I said, because I feel like men's doubles and doubles in general, the days of a clear front and clear rear court player are kind of done. You will have players and pairs that have obviously one player stronger in a certain formation, but I think for pairs to do really well, both players need to be able to play both areas of the court almost equally well. Or if they're a bit weaker, say the front court, like Gutama in comparison to Isfahani, then just to bring it up to get it close. We've seen that in a number of pairs. We've seen it obviously a few years ago in Rasmussen, in the pair of Astrup and Rasmussen. I actually thought I saw it a little bit this week from Ardianto, who's not naturally a great front court player. He played brilliantly in the front court in his semi-final against the Koreans. Obviously, another big example, Shi Yu Qi, I mentioned. I really sang his praises in that respect last week. But Gutama, definitely, he's quite a skillful player, but I think he's always been more of the kind of... I liken this pair to Asan and Setiawan, with Isfahani's the Setiawan character, the front court player, and Gutama is more the Asan character, smashing and a bit more of the player from the back of the court. The other thing is that Isfahani is a sublime front court player. He is a bit like Setiawan Mark II. Not quite as good, but my God, that guy can read the front court brilliantly. And what I find quite funny when you watch him, if you saw him on the street, or if you went to a badminton club and he walked in, you didn't know who he was. You just think he's some bloke walking in. He just looks like he doesn't look like, you put him next to like Kim Won-ho and Jay, who look like athletes. He just looks like a guy off the street, and then you watch him play and he looks quite casual, and he's just always in the right place at the right time. The way that he reads that front court and reads the game in general, it is absolutely amazing. They are good to watch. They've been on a real meteoric rise since the beginning of last year, and now they're kind of setting themselves as one of the best pairs in the world. In the final, I'll talk a bit about the final. It reminded me actually, this final, of a bit like, but in different ways, from the All England semi-final between Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae and He Jiting and Ren Xiangyu. In that semi-final, the Chinese pair came out blisteringly fast, and the Koreans just were not up to speed. They just couldn't handle it. It was just the attacking prowess of the Chinese blasted them away. And in this final, Gutama and Isfahani started incredibly fast. They weren't blasting through them, but the flat game, the front court interceptions, they were just so much sharper and so much quicker than the Koreans, and the Koreans just weren't able to get into it. They were always on the back foot, they were always below tape, and in a hall like the Astoria, that's not a good place to be, and they found themselves in that situation a lot. And it looked like, for a majority of that opening game, that it was going to continue that way. But why the difference between that semi-final and this Indonesia final is that the Koreans were able to weather the storm a little bit sooner, but then when they did, it wasn't like the Indonesians were still able to make a game of it and got very close in the second, whereas obviously in the All England, once the Chinese pairs game plan suddenly wasn't working, they kind of fell a bit off a cliff edge. But yeah, no, I think the Koreans were able to gain a little bit of control. I think Seung Jae was the first one to do it, to try and impose a style, lay off, use the soft blocks to then come forward and try to get on top of the net that way. Obviously Kim Won-ho was doing that as well, and I think another big factor into why the Koreans were able to win was that both Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae were playing really well. The only times I've ever seen them lose this year, when they have lost, is usually one of them is having a bit of a bad day, or not the best of day, and they're not able to raise it. We saw that, I think, in the Singapore Open final last week. Kim Won-ho, again, was the player that was slightly weaker, but wasn't able to... It wasn't like he played badly, but, his level can be up here, but it was just there, and it never really raised, whereas in the Indonesia Open, his general level was higher, and he was able to raise it at times, and obviously Seung Jae was being Seung Jae, and when both Kim and Sir are playing like that, they are very difficult to play with, and they were just able to nullify the Indonesians, what they were doing. They became a little bit more used to the speed. they were able to gain a little bit of control. You started to see a few longer rallies, and the game kind of went more towards them. The Indonesians almost got it back in the second. It did feel a bit tetchy, but then once it went to the third, it was pretty much the Koreans all the way. But yeah, no, can't take away. What a fantastic tournament, like I said at the start, for Isfahani and Gutama. And last thing I'll say on it is that I think, and you can agree with me or not agree, let me know. This result keeps Hendra Setiawan's record alive. Now, if you don't know what Setiawan's record, Hendra Setiawan retired at the start of this year after a career that spanned 25 years. And his record was that ever since 2002, he'd reached at least one final every year. Okay? And I think bar the first year in 2002, they'd been the equivalent of Super 500 and above, which is absolutely just ridiculous. But obviously in 2025, he only played one tournament, the Indonesian Masters, him and Mohamed Hassan's final tournament, and they obviously lost before the final. So his record technically did play in this year, so his record was gone. But now he is the coach for Gutama Isfahani, and they reached the final. So will you agree with me that that keeps Setiawan's record alive? It'd be really interesting if, as a player, he got to the final every year from 2002 out to 2024, becomes a coach in 2025, and now every year as a coach he's going to have a pair at least reach one final. That would be absolutely amazing, and it'd be even more impressive if he only sticks with one pair and doesn't become a national team coach where there's multiple pairs, and it makes it a little easier. But yeah, no, thought I'd just chat that in at the end. Do you agree with me or not? But yeah, no, again, let me finish by saying great tournament for Gutama and Isfahani. I hope the injury to Isfahani isn't too severe, and that he can, with a little bit of rest, you know, a couple of days off or a week off, some good treatment, he can come back and obviously be ready for the next leg of tournaments. Okay, so I'm actually going to get onto the Q&A now. It might feel like it's a bit early. We've only been going about half an hour, 35 minutes, and you're probably thinking, huh, Ben usually doesn't do this until at least an hour into the video, but there's a reason for this. And the main reason is that when I ask your questions, most weeks when I get questions, I get lots of questions, but they're generally similar things. You know, there's a lot of repetitive questions of, you know, this player or pair won, why, how did they win, and this kind of stuff. But this week there was so much variation. There were a few topics, a few questions that came up multiple times. You'll probably be able to work out which ones those were, but I felt that actually, why not just answer more questions, spend more time on them, because they kind of cover the same things that, you know, I was going to talk about anyway. So let's kick these questions off. The first one: what went wrong with Wang Zi in the final? Game second set, 17-9 lead, and ended up losing. Like I said, right at the start, Seung was able to win her third consecutive Super 1000, her third Super 1000 of the year, a first in women's singles, and it also means that she can technically win all four of the Super 1000s, which would be a, what you call it, like a Grand Slam or a Super Slam, which obviously has never been done in women's singles. So what happened? You know, Wang Zi was in such a commanding position. She won the first game pretty comfortably. Was it like 12 or 13? And then was leading 17-9, only to go and lose it 21-19. And then I can't remember what the score in the third game was, but Seung, it doesn't really matter, Seung came out as winner. I think before saying what happened, I think it's quite important to talk about what got her to that position. And for me, you know, there's lots of different things. There's plenty of layers to all these tactical observations, etc. But there was a few key ones. I felt that in the opening stage of the game, it was quite interesting because Seung was being far more the aggressor and Wang Zi was playing the more patient game. I think when they played at the All England, it was somewhat the other way around, maybe because Seung was a little bit under the weather in that match and wasn't able to, you know, play with that much intensity in terms of the attack. That takes a bit more out of you than defense. But it was quite interesting how Seung approached the game, that she was going to go after Wang Zi. She wasn't going to sit back and let Wang Zi attack her. What that plays into is, I think the main thing was, if I had to sum it up in one word, I'd call it accuracy of attacking shots. Seung's attack was majority of the time not accurate enough. Now, the Astora is difficult to be accurate in because of the drift, especially the sideways drift. There's always been a drift from left to right as you look at the screen, and it's very, very pronounced. However, having said that, the difference in how both players were able to play those conditions was quite different. Seung, when she attacked to the left side as you look, so where the service judge is, so many of her attacks were so narrow. Like, they were literally just hitting it straight to Wang Zi's racket. Whereas Wang Zi was able to get them, you know, we're not saying they were on the line every single time, but a bit closer to the lines more often. And then when Seung used the other side of the court, there were a few errors going that way as well. Not loads of errors that way, but she wasn't able to control. Her accuracy to both sides wasn't particularly good. And what that means is because she was playing so narrow to Wang Zi, especially when she was playing to that left side as you look at it, Wang Zi didn't really have to work very hard, was able to play quite a controlled shot and work out a counter to the attack. And obviously with Seung being the aggressor, working harder, that only meant that Wang Zi's working even less and Seung's having to work even harder to kind of scramble to shots. And so I think as a result, you found Seung in less times when she was in a position where she could really be up high in the front court and play with control. So I think her inaccuracy, especially to that left side as we looked at, was quite a noticeable thing for me. And again, like I said, Wang Zi was able to kind of, when she did attack, she played very patiently. When she did attack, it was usually pretty effective. I think also, for me, errors as well is always going to be a bit of a factor. I kind of alluded to already. Seung made a few uncharacteristic errors from like the midpoint of the first game, and that kind of carried through until the point where she was 17-9 down. Now, what changed? For me, I think there's a few things. One, I think what we have to say is that what I noticed when I watched it, it looked like from, say, I can't remember what the score was, but the few points before 17-9, it looked a little like Seung. She wasn't giving up, but she looked a bit kind of, she was losing belief. It was slowly eking out of her. Slowly, she was like, oh, this is just not my day. You know, I can't hit the accuracy, you know, I'm making mistakes, and my opponent is playing very solid badminton, not giving away errors, bit more pinpoint accuracy on the attacks, was following up a little better, and it's just one of those days, and maybe she felt it with it. But then at 17-9, I think she got given a couple of cheap points, but it was quite noticeable. It was almost like Seung just went, right, this is my last chance. I need to make a move. If I'm going to salvage this match, I need to make the move now. This is the time. And you could tell that she just gave it everything from that point. And it was helped by a few other things. One was that clearly Wang Zi, in Steen's words, said that she had a bit of a meltdown. We saw a few return of serve errors or some cheap points. Started to see those mistakes from her. She got a little bit, it was quite clear when she was playing, not even when she was making mistakes, but her quality of shot, you could tell that she was a bit tight in the racket. She just started to feel that pressure, especially as Seung got to what, like within 3 or 4 points, suddenly like she was like, oh no, I'm going to throw this match. This is, you know, and I think that it kind of ran away from her there. I think also Seung's accuracy did improve a little bit, and I felt that there was a big effort to get onto the net. I saw a few more really early getting in and playing a lot of tight spins and trying to kind of dominate that net area. Now, to Wang Zi's credit, a lot of times when Seung played the spin, Wang Zi swung back and then Seung was forced to lift it away. But just the approach to what she was trying to do, to try to get on top of the net and dominate and push forward. And basically, I think Seung did that probably because she felt she had to, but also I think she noticed when she probably could feel the pressure, the tenseness that Wang Zi was feeling. She just wanted to make her presence known at the front. So when you're feeling a bit tight, if someone's really pressing in on you, especially when going over the top is quite difficult as well, even more so when you're feeling tense, it just doesn't feel like an option. I think Seung was almost like a shark sniffing blood in the water and really came at it. And that's what got her into the, pushed it into the third game. In the third game, it kind of reset a bit at the start. I think the midpoint was, again, it was back to what it was for the beginning of the first game. And then halfway through the third, again, I think Wang Zi just fell off, faded again. So yeah, no, The second halves of both games in the second and third, she kind of wilted away. And I think, like I said, Seung could just sniff that. Another thing that I actually noticed was that we started to see, like I said, there was few inaccuracies in the smashing from Seung, you know, kind of smashing, say, straight onto the racket. We started to see a few more body smashes. And they proved to be very effective. That's actually something I noticed in Singapore as well in drifty conditions, and I noticed it here this week in the men's and the women's singles. Body smashes are very effective. I mean, body smashes are effective in general anyway, because when you're in singles, you're generally defending and having to cover the lines, the sides out here, so you're more focused here, so sometimes you can leave yourself a bit open. Another thing is, even if you are ready for a body smash, which you rarely are, the defensive shot, it's hard, there's no angle to play off. So if you smash at someone's body, even if they can get it back and get it back okay, the next shot that you've got to follow up is a little easier. So if you're feeling a bit tense or a bit tight, or you're struggling to get to the lines, or you don't want to be kind of put into a bad position on the follow-up, the body smash is very effective. Also, you know, like I said, you can get a lot of winners from there and follow-ups, and I think in these windy conditions where going out to the lines was a little trickier, the body smashes proved to be very effective. Last thing I'll say about this, on this question, is that for me, it's quite interesting now for me to see next time if Wang Ziyi and Seung face in another Super 1000 final, or even in the World Championship final. These two have faced in every Super 1000 final so far this year, and Seung has won all three. But more specifically, this one and the All England is these two results where realistically you'd probably say, if you turned it on halfway through the second game, that Wang Ziyi was in the driving seat and had great chances, but was gone on to lose both times. Is that going to create a bit of a mental block for her next time she plays Seung in one of these major finals? You know, the All England, Seung was clearly not at 100% fitness, and Wang Ziyi played a great opening game and had the advantage, but wasn't able to put it home. And then here she had a game in 17-9 lead and also threw it. So you're probably going to find, if she gets in that position again, there's doubts. She just feels like, you know, that could be a factor in not just the next 1000, but like I said, in the World Championships and other major finals against a player like Seung. So yeah, that'll be quite interesting to look out for. Following Shi Yu Qi's losses, is it, in brackets prematurely, appropriate to deem his peak passing pretty quickly? He's older than most players, 29 going on 30, and is progressively more tired, sluggish and diminished. Now, I do think that's a little harsh to say. I think Shi Yu Qi's demeanour sometimes can look that way a little bit, but I wouldn't say he's shown any signs of being really tired, sluggish, or even disinterested. In fact, all week this week in Indonesia, I felt he looked very good actually. And even in the opening game against Antonsen, I was like, wow, he's putting on an absolute masterclass here. It was only really up until obviously the second and third games against Antonsen that, you know, I saw a slightly lower level version of Shi Yu Qi, but a big part of him not being able to win that was Anna's. You have to give Anna Antonsen huge credit. You know, he did end up winning the whole tournament, and he played really brilliantly tactically. He changed his game completely from the first game, where actually I felt like he really wasn't doing too much with the shuttle at all. It just felt like he was not really in the game, but managed to find his feet. Tactically started to play very, very astutely, and was able to win. And yeah, maybe I would say that towards the end of the final game, Shi Yu Qi did start to look a little bit sluggish and maybe a little bit tired, but I don't think overall he's that way. I think the level that we generally saw this week was good. It was very good. Who knows, maybe this isn't his main focus. I'm sure he wanted to do well, sure he wanted to win, defend his points from last year, and obviously it's a Super 1000, but he might have his eyes a little bit more on the future, most notably the World Championships, where I'm sure he'll want to get to another final and make it a gold instead of a silver. Is his peak passing pretty quickly? No, I don't think after just 2 tournaments we can really say that, especially when in one of them, the Indonesia Open, I said I actually thought he was absolutely brilliant up until you know, maybe midway through that second game against Anna's. And 29 going on 30, that might seem old if you've got the mindset of 10, 15 years ago, but in this day and age, with the way things are going, the way training methods are changing, and recovery and sports science, etc., we're seeing more players carry on. And Shi Yu Qi is an absolute physical specimen. He's a fantastic athlete. So I know the training in China is incredibly tough, and there's always youngsters snapping at your heels, but I don't see his age as being a factor yet. I think maybe if he continues after LA, if he does, then we can talk about it. Then you're into your kind of like getting closer to your mid-30s. But I think 29 on 30, yeah, it's not young, and things will have to change. But Shi Yu Qi's got all the skills to be able to adapt his game pretty well. He isn't someone that just relies on one thing. He's got a fantastic attack. Like I said, he's physically good. His defense is solid. He's got very, very sharp skills. And in general, he has very high shot quality. I think he's someone that could definitely... I don't think he needs to do it yet, but if he needs to adapt his style slightly, he's more than capable of doing that. Do you have any thoughts on the shocking incivility of the crowd? The conduct shown was quite unprecedented for no apparent reason as well, just seemed like general animosity. So yeah, no, let me quickly explain. This happened in the semi-finals. In the men's doubles. It started in the first semi-final with Gutama Isfahani against Man and T of Malaysia. And I can't remember at what point it started. It might have been from the beginning. But whenever the Malaysians went to serve, or when they had the shuttle, they won a point and they picked it up and they're walking around, the usual, you tell your partner what you're going to do. The crowd would just do like a boo, like a droning boo, a long boo, like just, that kind of thing. And then that carried on into the next semi-final between Alfie Nardianto and Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae. There was booing going on, and it's received a lot of backlash. A lot of people, especially Malaysian fans, felt it very unsportsmanlike, uncouth, just not very nice, and just something that you shouldn't really do. And my thoughts on it, I've got a theory on the booing actually that I think actually holds true, but for me, I think it is unnecessary. You don't need to boo the players. I would rather them just keep cheering for their keep chanting the name of their players. That would be a better thing. That's actually what we saw in the final. We didn't get any of the booing in the final. It was just more continuous cheering for Gutama and Isfahani. But what I will say actually, sorry, before I get onto my booing theory, is that in terms of it off-putting the players, I'm not so sure it does. Obviously, they're aware they're being booed, but I think most players, when they're playing against the home crowd, especially in Indonesia, this has been going on for years, although this is one of the first times I've just heard straight up booing for no reason. I've heard boos in the Astora where a player's like argued with the umpire, or there's been a bad line call, or a decision that goes against the Indonesians. Then we hear those kind of jeers and boos, but not just no reason, nothing's happened, and they just start booing. I can't remember if I've heard that before. I don't think I have. Sorry, what was I getting at? I can't remember. I lost my train of thought then. Oh yeah, no, in terms of off-putting the players, because it was a droning boo, it was just sound, and players are used to hearing noises all the time. Music goes off, the announcers say something, obviously you've got cheers from the crowd. It's not tennis. When you're about to serve, there's always some sort of noise going on, especially in the Asian countries. So I don't think that it would off-put the players. Something more off-putting would be a sudden noise out of somewhere. About to serve, and suddenly a load of people suddenly shout very loud. We did get that at the Singapore Open, and that was a little bit more. You could see there was a couple of times where Kim Won-ho, well, there was one definite one where Kim Won-ho actually stopped. But, so I don't think it actually is off-putting to the players in that way. Like I said, they're very aware. And I think when you're in the zone of the match, noise becomes noise. Yeah, you know that they're cheering, or you know that there's booing, but it just becomes this background noise. And you're so focused on what you're doing on the court that, I don't think it really, I wouldn't say it puts them off in that way. I've played, obviously, at a lower level. I've played in front of some, you could call rather hostile crowds, or crowds that were definitely cheering their home player. And that's how I felt, as in, they're jeering and chanting and all this kind of stuff, but after a while it becomes just background noise, and you're so focused on what you're doing that you don't really notice it. Obviously, something that suddenly is different, then it's a different matter. That can kind of jolt you. Like I said, someone calls a fault or a service judge coughs. Anyway, so yeah, no, that's enough of that. I'm going to get onto my booing theory in terms of why it started and why it happened. Because, like I said, we didn't see it in the final. It just didn't happen. Even though it happened with Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae against another Indonesian pair. They played another Indonesian pair in the final. Yeah, it didn't happen. So I think it was a few factors. One is that it was Indonesia versus Malaysia. You know, there's that rivalry, Indonesia and Malaysia going on. Okay. Secondly, the coaches for Malaysia, Harry IP, former Indonesian men's doubles coach, and Rexy Meineke, who's also coached Indonesia, but is also a legend of Indonesian men's doubles. So I think the fact that they had Indonesian coaches for them is just another factor. If you add to that Malaysia recently have been doing so well, you know, spoken about Aaron Cha and So Yik, they reached 3 consecutive finals, but Man and T also reached one of those finals in Malaysia, and they won that tournament. So I think with that rivalry there between Indonesia and Malaysia already, obviously Malaysian coaches being more Indonesian, the crowd probably weren't too pleased with that, and I think they just didn't want Malaysia to do well again. They just probably didn't want them to win and get into the final and have a chance of winning a 4th tournament in a row. I think they just were like, no, we don't want any of that, and so they just didn't want any of it. And then what I really think kicked this off, and I don't know for certain, this is the only one I'm kind of guessing in the dark, because I've seen this at other events, that I wouldn't be surprised if anyone was at the event and can confirm this, great, but if not, dispute it, it's great. I reckon there was a couple of pockets, maybe one pocket of fans that started it, and then mob mentality took over. You know, say like a group of 20 start going boo, like jeering, suddenly it's like the Mexican wave. It just spreads around the arena, and then it becomes something that just, the crowd just, they're doing it. They can't stop. It just becomes a thing, and that's why it also bled over into the next semi-final, the match straight after. And then the next day, maybe those people that started it, you know, weren't there, or you know that there was nothing to stoke it in the first place, that we just didn't see it because it didn't happen in the final. The only time I heard jeering was, I think it was when Gutama wasn't allowed to towel down or something. So again, it leads into jeering because the Indonesians, there was something going against their players. It wasn't just booing for booing's sake. So that's my booing theory. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I'm not saying that to try and condone it in any manner. I do believe it was unnecessary. I'm like, what are you doing this for? What's the point? You know, just do more singing and chanting. I'd rather hear, you know, my wife even said to me, I haven't heard the Indonesians getting into song this year. We've heard lots of cheering and banging and stuff, but usually they crack into a song, and that's great to hear. And really kind of like lifts the whole mood. I'd rather have seen them just do that rather than the booing. To me, it was just completely unnecessary and just really achieved absolutely nothing, in all honesty. And I hope we don't see it again. The final was much nicer because it was just, you know, when the Koreans won a point, yeah, it was quiet, expected. And then when they went to serve, it was just, again, chanting and cheering for their Indonesian players, not booing the Korean players. So yeah, no, that's my thoughts on that. What do Kim and So have that no other men's doubles pair seems to have? They have won all 3 pursuits of 1,000 so far and have been very dominant. What sets them apart from other top men's doubles pairs? So yeah, no, Kim and So, obviously, they only played 2 tournaments on this leg, the Singapore Open and the Indonesia Open. They won Indonesia and got to the final Singapore. Now, that's quite a surprising result when you consider that the Korean approach to badminton, especially men's doubles, I think it doesn't really kind of feed too well into these kind of conditions. You know, they're very solid and very, what you call basic, and the Astora tends to favour the players that are a bit more creative and a bit more out there and are willing to and can play those conditions well. You know, players that can disturb rhythm. You know, pairs like the Indonesian pair that got to the final. In all honesty, so yeah, no, it was great. So yeah, it doesn't really match up too well, but in Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae, they are just 2 very good badminton players. You know, Korea have put together, they're probably their 2 strongest doubles players. And I think even they're just a cut above, especially Seung Jae, a cut above even your best other Korean players. So first and foremost, they're two absolutely brilliant players. They can both play the front court and the back court equally well. I think Seung Jae is a bit stronger from the from the back court over Kim Won-ho. And I'd say they're different, but they're pretty equal when it comes to the front court. Maybe Seung Jae can do it a little bit more consistently. He's able to kind of handle pressure maybe a little bit better, but they're equally pretty solid. So there's no way you can get them into a kind of worse formation. I think they link up very well. They're obviously being left and right-handed. That kind of sets up nicely into some, I always talk about the forehand cross, smash into the forehand the other way. You know, if I'm left-handed, smash it cross court. The opponent lifts it straight, that's straight to another forehand. That's a classic left-right combination, or both left-hander pushing up the left side, right-hander pushing up the right, and then you're both kind of on the front court that way. They're able to do that really well. And I think a big thing is and I think Steen Pedersen talked about this, is their mixed doubles background. Obviously very successful players in the mixed doubles. Kim Won-ho, silver medalist in the Olympics last year, and Seung Jae is the current, actually, world champion in mixed doubles. And I think in mixed, you have to be able to play a variety of nice, soft touches. You have to just find the gaps a bit better, and you've always got to have one eye on maintaining your balance and control in the rally. In men's doubles, you sometimes see pairs launching smashes and one player's flying at the court, and then they come back on, and you can your partner can cover you if you do that. You know, Indonesian way of doing that, if you think of the minions, so many times you see like smashing or doing something and they're out the court for one shot, but the other pair's so quick. You do that in mixed doubles as the man, you're leaving the lady on their own. That's just not going to be good. So you have to be much more. You have to play the game with one eye on maintaining your balance and control, and that I think is what obviously Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae are able to do very well, and also what they're able to do well in all sorts of different conditions. They can find that control. They can play very fast. They can play very attacking. They've got incredibly solid defense. They link up well. They're equally strong from the front and the back. They can find the gaps, etc., etc. And they're just fantastic players. I mean, Seung Jae is just an absolute tactician. Just his shot choice, he always seems to just place his smashes or place his little blocks just in the right spot at the right time. And I think Kim Won-ho does that as well. I think Seung Jae just really stands out for me. So yeah, and I think all these factors are why they've been so successful so far, and why they're doing so well in halls that play completely differently. So this for me was a very important win for them. Two important results in Singapore and Indonesia, because the conditions are far more difficult. And so yeah, the fact they were able to kind of play as they did and to win in Indonesia just shows their quality. How did Thom Delphine manage to win a Super 1000 title when they haven't even won a Super 500 or Super 750 once? Is lack of top Chinese and Korean mixed doubles players the main reason behind their win? I think obviously you have to kind of, I think when you answer this first, you have to kind of obviously state the obvious. Mixed doubles is still going through a bit of a transition phase. A number after the Olympics, top pairs either retired, switched partners, changed disciplines, all sorts. There's lots of different things. You kind of like, you know, mixed doubles had its top 6 pairs for a number of years, and a big chunk of those are no longer around. So it's kind of opened the door for pairs to kind of come in and get results like this. And I think you could also chalk this win up to the top 2 Chinese pairs being split up and not entered in this, or not playing in this tournament. Obviously, Feng Yinzhou and Wei Yaxin did, but Wang Dongming and Zhang Dangbang didn't get into the tournament. So, you know, the fact that the Chinese didn't have their top 2 pairs there obviously opened the door for absolutely everyone, because at the Super 500s, Feng and Wang won both those tournaments and were looking in, and before then were looking in really good form. So had they played, would the French have struggled to win? Yeah, of course. But I think if you were to just simply say this is why the French won, it's a little bit unfair and a bit of a disservice to them, because they were really, really good this week. They played absolutely brilliantly. I think one big factor is that Delphine Delrue, she admitted that this is the first time in months that she's playing injury-free. She had said that after Singapore, even though they lost in the first round. She said how delighted she was that she was able to play with no pain. And so obviously they clearly had the level, the capability there. And obviously this week they were able to show it fully. Yeah, no, they were absolutely fantastic. I thought Delrue absolutely controlled the front of the court brilliantly. Her play from there, her interceptions were a huge factor in them winning the final and also in most of their matches. It's not like she'll intercept it, she does these ones really well, where she kind of like waits for it. But where most players will then try to hit with more pace, what she does really well is she can do that, but she does a lot of them where she kind of pushes it down. So it's coming down below the tape, but it kind of goes through the front player and lands in front of the rear player. And why that's so effective, obviously there's no pace to feed off. So a pair can't, expose their possible lack of speed, especially Delrue's. But it means they've got to put pace in, and in a hall like the Astora, where it's much harder to control the lifting, it meant that they were able to kind of predict or anticipate the next shot. So yeah, no, the little intercepts that drop the shuttle with pace in front of their opponents and below the tape not only set her up to follow, but allow also, like I said, because the lifting's difficult, allow Gicquel to move in next to her and get up on the front court. And he did that so well. There were so many times where she's intercepting the round ahead, and you can see as soon as you do that, Thom shifts from behind her out to the side, and then he might get one, and then he's on top. And it was so hard to get it over them. He covers the court really well. He makes himself really big, and he was pushing up the court. That's what he did really well. He attacked with great variation. He was moving very fast. He looked like he's been putting in a really strong training block. I said this about the Pop brothers and other French players that maybe not playing at the Sudirman Cup gave him those extra few weeks of training, and this is what we're seeing the signs, the fruition from. But yeah, no, he attacked really well, great variation, but it was him pushing up the court. And really dominating. And then I think with Delrue intercepting really well from the front court was enabling Thom to have much more faith that shuttles weren't going to go through her, so he could come in around next to her and then get up on the front court and play those kind of shots from there. Another thing, I think lastly, because obviously they played Dechapol and Subsara, a pair who they played twice before, both times in finals, and both times they lost. I think I did on one of my Beckman's breakdowns before, I think it was the Thailand Masters. One of the factors I felt that went against the French was that they tried to play with too much speed when they were slightly not in a 50-50 area, but when they're slightly below the tape. So they're slightly behind in the rally and they're trying to keep with speed. What they did here, they took a lot of the speed out. I've already spoken about Delrue's interceptions, but also Gicquel was finding those kind of gaps from the midcourt. I talked recently about how well Feng Yanzer's put that into his game. That's something Seung Jae does really well. It's something all good mixed players do, but those kind of finding those tight cross-court gaps, that little bit of space in the front court or maybe just in front of the male player, those are the areas to expose, and he exposed those really well. And obviously I've spoken about his attack and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I felt the French didn't get wrapped up into the fast game, which could have been very easy in a hall like the Astora. They were able to take the pace out. Obviously, they still did play with speed and pace. You can't go a badminton game without it, but they did it from a much stronger position when they had worked the rally. So yeah, no, a fantastic tactical display, a really good performance. And yeah, all week, Thom, Gicquel and Delrue were absolutely just on fire. They had an absolutely, they just played really, really well. So I think, to put it to just the fact that Korean mixed and Chinese mixed weren't there, I think that's a bit of a disservice to the French pair. I think they thoroughly deserved this win, and you shouldn't take anything away from it. And I think this win is going to really makes it exciting for the World Championships, which are going to be held in France. What is still lacking in Pearly Thinaah, in your opinion? Well, obviously Pearly and Thinaah have really come on leaps and bounds. They are a fantastic pair. They are in the women's doubles, one of the pairs that I really do enjoy watching. That's because they play fast badminton, attacking badminton. You can see they put their heart and soul into every match they do, every match they play, and they showed that again in the Indonesia Open. What an absolutely fantastic final. And like I said earlier, they're one of the pairs that have played all 4 tournaments on this leg and done well in all 4. So for them, right at the end, to still be fighting for everything like that at the end and put in that much energy and that much effort, is absolutely a huge thumbs up for me and absolutely sublime. What they can do better, or what they can improve on, for me, I think it's going to come down to, and again, this is going to sound hypercritical, but when you're at the absolute elite level, it needs to be. So it might come across as a little bit harsh, but I think the Malaysians need to be able to win more points. Now, I say that even though Pearly, has one of the hardest smashes in badminton. She just straight up can smack that shuttle seriously hard. And Thinaah's is no slouch, but there's two things to this and how they can win points. One, I think Thinaah needs to develop a bit more variation on her rear court. I think she can smash it quite hard, but in the final against the Chinese, there was too many periods where it was all same pace. She tried to kind of change the angle up a bit, but it wasn't enough to really disrupt the Chinese. She did it occasionally, but just again, if they were able to get Thinaah near the back, it was almost too easy for them to keep lifting it back to Thinaah. She wasn't able to smash where you would force the Chinese to try to do some sort of flat shot, force them into that, where then Pearly could get in on the front court. And that leads nicely into the second one. And this goes for when they're in both formations. I think they need to be able to develop how well they work together as a pair when they're in the attack. So become a little bit more efficient, being able to win points a little bit easier. I feel like it's either through attrition or, like a really good drop shot, say from Pearly, or like a thundering smash from her, like an all-out winner. That's not to say that they don't do a smash with a follow-up, but I just feel like if I compare them to, say, Matsuyama and Shida, are quite similar. Both play very fast and exciting badminton and have good rotational skills and play in a sort of kind of similar way. They're able to kind of engage each other a little bit more often, whether that's placement of the smashes or just trying to figure out slightly better ways to get the front player involved. I just feel like that's something that they could develop. And the last thing would be how they can change defense into attack a little bit more. I felt that against the Chinese, they defend well, they get a lot of shuttles back when on defense, but I feel they could have a little bit more of a mindset of always trying to do something on it rather than just sending the shuttle back. I feel, again, it's really, really harsh because it's not like they can't do it or that they don't show it, but I feel like a little bit more, and that's the small things they can just develop it better. So Thinaah with a little variation from the back, how well they can get each other involved when they're attacking. So how do they get both players involved? Whether that's smash from the front to intercept to the net, or whether it's a rotational thing and getting both players at the front, all that kind of stuff, just how they link up better, and then how they change defense into attack that little bit more often. Because they both have fantastic shots, they both can hit it hard, they both have sharp skills, they're both very fast, they never give up, they're physically very fit, and they are a really good pair. But yeah, if I had to say a couple of things that they would need to get better, it would be those. How would you rate Anna's and Chou's performance today? Anna's Antonsen and Chou Chen was the final of the men's singles, and it was a battle of the Astora boys, I guess you call it. I mean, Antonsen self-claimed to be the Astora boy, and he said in an interview that there's only one, and I would agree there is only one, and that's not because Anna's won, that's because Chou Chen isn't the Astora boy, he's the Astora man. That guy is an absolute fan favourite inside the Astora, and he just has that extra energy when he's there. Not just the yeah stuff before the thing, just in general. I think the Astora just brings it out of him. But in the final, the crowd weren't quite able to lift him enough. I think the game started well for Chou Chen, and I think Anna started a little slow, a bit like he did in the semi-final. Chou was playing very, very attacking badminton. He was hitting great smashes, he was moving around the court so well. That's something that I thought he did absolutely brilliantly all week long. His attacking game was great, his energy was high, and for someone who's 35, moving like that, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm 2 years older, but even 2 years ago, there was no chance. No chance. Absolutely insane. But I think, I'll be honest, this end to the first game, and Chou played the end of that first game very poorly. some sloppy mistakes, and just kind of like lost his way a little bit. And then that kind of, when it came to the second game, Antonsen got himself sorted. He plays the Astora so well. I think, do you know when Anders does the kind of stuff where he does a lot where he comes to net, and rather than like hitting it on the move, he'll plant his foot, delay it, and do all these kind of little dinky push shots. That stuff works so well in a hall like this because it just throws you off balance. You might be fractionally late and then it's harder to control it. And as we all know, Antonsen is a great tactician and is able to work out. And in a venue like the Astora where that's what's required to do well. And so, yeah, no, Antonsen, all credit to him. Played a fantastic match. Chou did look a little tired as the match progressed in the second game. I think he faded a little bit, whereas Antonsen kind of lifted. And then what really played into it, what kind of hammered it home, was that the difference between the two is that Antonsen was able to win his points not just more, but more efficiently. And Chou had to work harder and harder. And you could kind of see that in the first game. And overall, as in like Antonsen's like attacking shots are just that little bit sharper, a little more deceptive, whereas Chou's, you probably say, are faster. And not like they're lacking accuracy, but they haven't quite got the same deception. I think once Anders had seen a few of them and kind of got used to it, he was able to figure out a way to kind of counter it. Obviously, a big part of it as well, I talked about Chou's age, 35, and Chou had, you know, a tough quarterfinal, a tough semi-final, beating two opponents that he hasn't beaten in a while in Shi Yu Qi and Kunlevit. So obviously, you know, I think he just didn't quite have the legs when he came into the final. I think losing that first game, I think it was a bit of an uphill battle to try and win that in 3. But I think another thing, like I said, the difference between when I watched Chou play Shi Yu Qi and Kunlevit and then playing Anders was that Shi Yu Qi and Kunlevit didn't really change the way they were playing. They just carried on as they were. Whether it won the match or lost in the match, won them points, lost them points, there wasn't too much changes in what was going on. Whereas Antonsen was able to, you know, kind of like change his style up a little bit. Do some more delays, then do a couple where he's done a few where he's waiting and doing this, and then the next one he will like pounce on it and do a sudden poke. So, you know, I think that disrupted Chou's rhythm a little bit. Whereas, you know, like Shi Yu Qi and Kunlevit played very classic to them. They weren't really doing too much to change it. So, yeah. Yeah, no, I think it was a good performance. I think the final wasn't as good as for Chou, obviously, as earlier in the week. But yeah, no, it was a good match. And congratulations to Anders Antonsen finally managing to win the Indonesia Open. It was third time lucky, and he managed to do it by beating in the semi-final the guy he lost to last year, and then beating Chou, obviously revenge for the 2019 final. So not only third time lucky, but he beat both players that had beat him previously. So that's good. He's become the third, also sticking with 3s, I think the third Danish player to win the Indonesia Open after Jan Jorgensen and Victor Axelsen. So yeah. Moving on, thoughts about the new BWF initiatives at Super 1000s, group matches, longer duration, and etc, etc. So yeah, when I saw, and if any of you don't know, the BWF announced relatively recently that from 2027, the way the World Tour is going to be structured and played out, and a number of other things are going to change. And a big one was that the Super 1000s are going to be played over 11 days. The men's singles and women's singles are going to have group stages similar to the Olympics. There's going to be more prize money. There's going to be increased broadcasting. I think BWF are going to be more involved with helping the federations to kind of fund it all and all that kind of stuff, which I think, I remember seeing one person write, and I think I agree that it could mean that ticket prices to go watch badminton will be slightly cheaper, which I think is actually a good thing, especially in the Asian countries. But yeah, no, these all really exciting initiatives. I'm not going to go through all of them, and I'm not going to talk much more because I've had the plan, once I saw these things, that I'm going to dedicate a Beckman's Breakdown special to this, because I think you need to go through. There's so much to go through that I think I can't do it all here. I won't do it justice. But I will say here that I am excited about it. I think BWF have listened to a few things. You know, not long ago, we were hearing Victor talking about how maybe we could spread out, and I've heard that conversation a few times, we could spread out tournaments a little bit longer. And lo and behold, that's one of the things that BWF are looking to change. People have been talking about the fact that you get Super 1000, and half the courts are streaming on piss poor quality. Now you're going to get 100% of the it done through TV broadcasting, which last thing means that they're going to need more commentators. I've put my name in the hat, guys. I'm going through all I can to try and get myself out there to become a commentator. Who would like to see that? Comment down below. But anyway, I will obviously, like I said, talk about that in the next episode of Beckman's Breakdown, because there's no tournaments now for a little while, so I've got a little bit of a break. Thank God. I do love badminton, don't get me wrong. I absolutely love it, and I love making these videos, but the last month of just watching as much badminton as I possibly can, thinking about things, and then trying to talk about them and edit them, it's been tough, it's tiring, and so I'm quite thankful for the gap, for the break. It also means that I can get back to more focus on the Daddies video. I'm still in the researching part because these tournaments have kind of got in the way, haven't had as much spare time to dedicate to it, but now obviously I'm going to have, a good few weeks. I can dedicate some more time to that, so there should be some more updates on that video coming shortly. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, all the usual YouTube things. I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.